Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. I hope that you're having a pleasant day. It is Monday, April 22nd, and it is beautiful here in suburban Chicago. It's in the high 50s now. We're expecting to get it up into the 70s. It's just going to be a lovely day. It's also not a school day, so both of my children are home, meaning I don't have my normal walk to narrate the podcast when I come home from taking a kid to school. So I decided to just go for a walk anyway, because I felt like doing a podcast. I have lots of things to share. Plus, sitting around on my butt all day doing my work isn't that good for my health. So at least getting out for my morning walk is a nice choice. So this episode might run a little longer than usual because I'm just strolling around. I don't have a particular end goal. So if you're dreading a 25-minute episode, which it probably will be, feel free to stop in the middle and start it up again later. There you are. Well, since last time I spoke with you, I have been to Iceland and back, and Washington, D.C. and back. So the next couple episodes are going to talk about those different experiences. In particular, this episode is going to talk about Iceland, my gaming experiences in Iceland, a little bit about the trip itself, and then my next one will be about D.C. and my gaming there. So this week, I guess, is going to be reports on my travels. Hopefully that's worthwhile and entertaining to you. So like I said, I took a trip to Iceland. It was a 4-day trip. It was very windy, which is fine. It is a windy place in Iceland. Our travel was hardly affected by the wind at all. We had, I think, a 2.5-hour delay before we got to leave on Tuesday, about a week ago, or 6 days ago. However, we were like the only ones who did not have trouble. Here's how windy it was. We came in Friday morning, and Friday afternoon it was so windy they canceled our horse riding excursion, and Saturday they canceled our full day trip to one of the national parks, which was pretty disappointing, although we found some cool stuff to do instead, including both the Saga Museum, which is like a wax museum about the history of Iceland, and we went to a lava tube, which is a cave created by lava erupting slowly, and it makes a big tube. So we got to go into this cool cave, which I always like going on cave tours. So that's those are those parts of the trip. But it was so windy that people who came in Friday afternoon, just a couple hours after us, had to sit on the plane for 3 hours because it was so windy they couldn't wheel out the little cart with the stairs so that they could get off the plane. That's how windy it was. Craziness. So we got pretty lucky. And then there were a couple days where they didn't have hardly any flights get out, which meant there were lots of people. There were a bunch of people on our flight who were supposed to have flown on Sunday and didn't get to leave till Tuesday. So we're really feeling pretty lucky that we got to leave when we did, as it made the rest of the trip possible. So that's kind of the quick and dirty summary of the trip to Iceland. But I had 3 parts of things I wanted to share about the trip to Iceland. I thought I would start with games I played myself, and then drift into the game places that I played. My wife and I got to play. So obviously when I'm traveling, that's a good time for solo gaming. And I brought a couple digital solo games with me because obviously I have stuff on my phone, and I had a couple analog solo games with me as well. So the games that I ended up playing the most on my phone, it was Ganz schön clever. That's pretty clever, it's called. This is a game I played quite a bit last year. I've talked about it before, so I won't spend too much time on it, but it is a really amusing roll and write with lots of different possible choices, which makes for an interesting game. I played half a dozen times or more, and I did finally crack that 200. I'd never broken 200 before this week, and I actually got 2 games that broke 200. So the next plateau seems to be like in the 240s. Apparently the really good players will often get in the 240s. I'm not that way, but I have broken 200 a couple times now. Although, like I said, half dozen plays, and I think I did it twice. So I'm still not great at it. I also played a number of short games of Potion Explosion against the AI. I lost all 3 of those games, I think. So the AI in Potion Explosion is very good, and I need to up my game on that if I want to continue kicking its butt. But I don't find a lot of thrill in talking about digital games. So analog games, I've played the 2 of them that I played myself a fair amount were Friday and Onirim. Friday is, of course, the Freedom and Free solo game in which you play the assistant to Robinson Crusoe on the island of whatever island he gets trapped on. You play Friday, and you're trying to help Robinson Crusoe survive. And it's an interesting push your luck game because the idea of the game at the beginning is that Robinson Crusoe is pretty much incapable of solving any of the problems he might face on the island. And so your job is to help him decide which problems he should face and take his lumps. And as he takes his lumps, he gets to discard cards out of his deck, some of which, or many of which, are bad cards. And so as you're getting rid of the bad cards and hopefully overcoming some obstacles, then you start getting good cards, and the good cards help you overcome the more difficult obstacles and so on. It is an excellent solo game. It is certainly susceptible to the whims of randomness, that you can just win or lose based on which cards you get out. You know, you get a couple really bad cards in a row where there's nothing you can do about them, and you just take so many hits you die. Most solo games have some level of that kind of problems, you know. Ganshon Clever, it doesn't matter how good you are at placing the dice. If you just roll badly a whole bunch, well, not much you can do about that. So in that way, Friday is a bit challenging. I did win 1 game of it, and I lost 2. I think I played it 3 times over the trip. It is a bit more involved as well. I played it on an airplane, but it is difficult to play on an airplane if you only have 1 tray. The time where I played it twice on the airplane was actually, I had an empty seat next to me, so I was actually able to play using 2 trays, which gave me enough room to spread out the way I needed to play it easily. On a table, it's no problem at all. It's not a big footprint. It's just slightly bigger than an airplane table. But the big play experience that I had, or the game that I would say dominates my memory of the trip in terms of games I played, was Onirim. Now, this is a favorite of mine in terms of solo games. It's easy to play. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes. It's really interesting decisions throughout. There is definitely a push your luck element to it. You know, you can just get screwed by luck, but there is an awful lot of skill as well, or you definitely can get better, which one of the ways I gauge if skill matters is if I play a game 4 times, can I learn from my experience and get better? As an aside, I will say the exception to that rule is Ghost Stories. I played Ghost Stories probably 7 or 8 times and never got better at it until I went and looked online a little bit and got some tips for myself about how to actually get better. And then I, in fact, did start to get better. So Ghost Stories might be the exception that proves the rule. But Onirim is interesting also because the main way that you can buy it when it's in print and it's constantly being reprinted and then goes out of print is to play it with the expansion. So the deluxe edition, the second edition, which is really the only one you can find now, comes with 7 expansions in the box, and they're all just a small assortment of cards that when you use them change the basic way that you engage the game. So instead of I think I've explained the game before, but just to remind you, in the game, the idea of the game is you're navigating some nightmares or something. The theme is kind of unnecessary. But you have a variety of different kinds of location cards. You play those to your board, and the location cards then allow you to find doors. And the doors are the way that you win. So in the base game, you have a deck, and it's got moon cards, sun cards, and key cards, and then it has doors. And the moon, sun, and key cards are in 4 different colors. And the doors are in 4 different colors. There's 2 doors of each color in the deck. There are also these nightmare cards throughout the deck that are bad. And so your goal is to play the location cards in alternating order. So like, remember I said there were sun and moon and key cards. So you can never play a sun card next to another sun card. It always has to be a sun card next to a moon card or a key card. And if you play 3 cards in a row of the same color, then you get to go through the deck and find one of the doors. Once you've found all 8 doors, you win. However, after you play a card, then you draw back up to 5. If one of the cards you draw is a nightmare, then you have to deal with that nightmare in one of 3 ways. You either discard your hand, which is difficult to do sometimes because your hand is always full of cards you can use, or you discard the nightmare and then draw 5 cards off the deck, and any cards in the deck that are cards you can use get discarded. The rest of the cards get shuffled back in, then you draw up. Or if you have a key, you can discard the key to get rid of the nightmare. So there's a variety of ways to get rid of the nightmares, but most of them involve discarding cards as well. And of course, if you have a key of the right color when you draw a door, you get to discard the key to get the door. So if you have a green key in hand and you draw the green door, you get to spend the key to get the door. But the game ends if you ever are supposed to draw cards and you can't, which happens a lot. So I would say the base game is pretty challenging. I win it maybe 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 times if I'm playing just the base game. He's got an expansion, however, that the first expansion, basically instead of playing the base game as normal, now you play the base game and you have to go in order. So now it tells you the 8 doors you have to achieve and what order you have to get them in. And then in order to win, you have to get the doors in that order. You can't get a door out of order. And it seems like that would be harder, and it would be harder if that were the only thing you got. But the other thing you get is you get the power to use the discard cards to do things. And there's 3 different things you can do, and you use the discard, basically as the discard pile accumulates, then you can spend cards from the discard pile and actually remove them from the game in order to use these special powers. And those special powers, if you use them carefully, make the game easier to win, not harder. So I found, actually, when I'm playing the first expansion with the extra doors, I'm able to win the game more easily. I was really happy, however, to be able to play Onirim enough that I remembered the base game. I'd played the first expansion. So actually, for the first time, played the second expansion, which is called the Glyphs. And the second expansion adds a new kind of card into the mix, and it adds 4 more doors. So now instead of getting 8 doors, you have to get 12. But you have a new location card, so it's easier to get 3 in a row. But you also can spend that location card to manipulate the deck in a certain way. I forgot to mention, you could always, on your turn, you could spend a key instead of keeping it to fight nightmares or using it as a location. You could spend it to manipulate the deck a little bit. I forgot to mention that. The glyph cards allow you to do that as well, and I discovered that the key cards combined with the glyph cards were really powerful. If you had a key and a glyph, you could really twist the deck around in a way that made it excellent. So, playing that next expansion, even though it's 12 locations instead of 8, or 12 doors instead of 8, I was still able to win the second time I played. The first time I hadn't really, it's challenging. But I'm really enjoying that, and I think this year I'm probably going to try to play all 7 expansions. It also reignites my interest in this line from Z-Man. A new one called Arion or something like that just came out, and I'm still a couple behind. I only have 2 of them, and I think there's 5. So I definitely am going to try to put one of those on my to-get list sometime soon. So that's Onirim. Very enjoyable solo game. The other game that we played a lot was Quicks. This is a light dice game. It's a roll and write. On your turn, you can make 2 X's on your sheet. On someone else's turn, you can only make 1. It's a pretty simple game to play, but it's got some interesting depth, and I've always had a good time when I played it. We played it several times on the trip. I taught my wife the game and she liked it quite a bit. We played several games of it. Enough that I have now played it 10 times this year. So in my organic top 10, it is the third game I've completed, along with Wingspan and Onirim. So I'm more than 30% of the way, actually like 57% of the way on my organic top 10, just because I played so many games on this trip that were solo games. And I'm not even counting Ganz Schön Clever, because that's a game I don't have in physical form at all. So if I have the game in physical form and I play it a couple times, but then I also play the digital one a couple times, I count that. But I won't count for my top for 10 a game I just played digitally. Anyway, so those are the games we played. I want to talk for a few minutes here about where we played games. Obviously, I've mentioned we played games on the plane, we played games in our hotel room, we even played games like at little diners when we would be waiting for our food to come. But there were 3 places we went that I wanted to share. The first is there was a game shop called Nexus, it's actually like a game and pop culture shop. Like if you think about, what would be the closest equivalent here? Like a comic shop that had a lot of other stuff is probably the closest. Or sort of like Barnes & Noble, if the book section was a quarter of what it is and all the other sections stayed the same size. So there's some t-shirts, there's some games, there's like little figurines, there's toys, and there was a huge game section. So many so that I didn't buy something because I had bought something at the other game shop. And so the 2 things that are true about Iceland throughout. One, it's a pain to bring stuff back because I was traveling and so I had a relatively small bag. And 2, everything is wicked expensive. Our food expenses for this trip were probably double what they would be for a US trip of a similar length. I mean, like we went to a place once where we had hamburgers and fries and sodas, and our bill was basically $40. I mean, it was a sit-down restaurant, but they don't have tips there. I mean, anyway, so very expensive for food. But the same is true of games. Like the cost of games there was quite a bit more than you would expect it to be here. Probably 20 to 30% higher than what you'd pay in a retail shop here. I'm not talking about a discounted place, but like what I would pay at my local game store if I had no discount. It add 20 or 30%, and that's what you're paying in Iceland. But anyway, so we went to this store called Nexus, and they had tons of games. They had a bunch of stuff that I've only seen a little bit on the shelves, but they did not have anything. I did not see anything that I couldn't get here, which was interesting. So I was sort of hoping to see some stuff like some European games, and there were a couple. I mean, there was a Time Stories chapter that I don't think is out in the US yet. And I saw, in the US, they sell the unlock games as $15 single games. And in Europe, they sell them as 3 games in 1 box for $45, give or take. And I saw a package of those. There were a couple games that I had only heard about and hadn't ever seen in person, but they were all games that were available. Like I didn't see anything there where I was like, oh, this game is out of print. The way that, I found the Agricola Farmers of the Moor at that little shop in Newfoundland. I didn't see anything like that. Huge game selection though, and I was very tempted to get a couple things that are less commonly found at shops here, but I did not. Because just before we went to Nexus, we had gone to a place called Spillavenir. So Spillavenir was a game shop, so Nexus felt like a corporate store. Like I said, it had a sort of Barnes and Noble's feel with fewer books. Spillavenir is a friendly local game shop. It's all games. The people were super nice. I had a nice chat with the guy whose name I've forgotten now. I apologize to him. But they had a whole bunch of different games on the shelf. I asked him if they had what they had that I could bring back that's rare or unusual, and I was able to get one game that is in Icelandic, made, and they have English rules on the website. I got that for a friend. And then he showed me a couple other games that were made by Icelanders, and games that I'd not be able to buy here, but they were huge. Like there was one, it was going to be like $90, and I don't know how I'd have gotten it back except to like carry a big game box with me on the plane. So I just couldn't bring myself to buy that. However, I did find a couple small box games that I'd never heard of, much less seen available here. And they are sort of one-shot mystery games, part of what's called the Q system. And they have the name Sherlock, although as far as I can tell, they're not Sherlock Holmes themed. They're contemporary. They're just like mystery games that you have to solve the mystery, but they have the name Sherlock. So my wife and I tried one of them called Sherlock, The Tomb of the Archaeologist, and that one was okay. The main problem was jet lag. So we started playing it at what felt like a pretty reasonable 8 p.m. And as soon as we started playing it, we both started feeling super tired. I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes when I'm feeling okay and I lay down to read, and then suddenly I just feel so tired. That's kind of the experience we had, that suddenly we were super tired, and instead of calling it, which we should have done, we played through anyway, and we didn't do very well because we didn't really understand the main mechanism. The mechanism is really interesting. You have a deck of cards that gives you clues about the game. There are a few bold-faced words which indicate the only things you can say about those clues to your group, unless you choose to share the clue with the group by playing it. So then what you're allowed to do is you can play a card and share it to the group, or you can discard a card face down, and then you can remember what it was, but you can't share the information with the group directly, except for those bold-faced words. And then at the end of the game, you have to try to solve the mystery, and you get points for each question you get right in the mystery. And then, this is the part I've never seen before, then you look at the cards that you played and the cards that you discarded. And then the game tells you which cards are relevant to the mystery. And for every irrelevant card that you played, you lose points. And I think, I'll have to go back and look, I think for every relevant card you discarded, you also lose points. So part of the idea of the game is you're trying to figure out which clues are relevant to the mystery by talking with your colleagues about it, sort of secretly. So I'm really keen to play. We bought 3 of them. We bought Sherlock, Tomb of the Archaeologist, we bought Sherlock, Death on the 4th of July, and we bought Sherlock, Last Call. So there's 3 of them. They were 1,200 Icelandic kroners each, which is roughly $10. So it was a reasonable price. They're pretty small decks, like 35 cards or something. But a neat game that I'll be able to play once each, and then who knows what I'll do with them. I kind of want to hold on to them because they're souvenirs, but holding on to games I can't play anymore is not my favorite idea. So we'll see. So those are games we got at Spilavenir. Oh, and then downstairs they have a huge gaming area. Huge. Where they do open gaming many nights, and they have game clubs. It was like as big as the store. And I can't articulate how big this area was. It's bigger than any space in my house. It's not like a small game room. It's a huge game room with couches and tables, and it looked like a lovely space to go play. So that's Spilavenir store. The other store is called Nexus. The last gaming experience I had in Iceland I wanted to share. So our last night there was a Monday night, and we were walking along and we were kind of trying to figure out what to do. We'd kind of finished our shopping and dinner, and it was like 6 o'clock. And we were going horseback riding the next day, so we knew we'd have to get up fairly early. We didn't want to make it too late at night. But at the same time, we hadn't really gotten over jet lag yet, which meant that our bodies felt like it was 1 in the afternoon. So we decided to stop in at this cafe where we had seen people playing Ticket to Ride through the window. And it's not a game cafe, but they have some games there. And thought we'd have some dessert and play a game of Quicks, and then head home. So we go to play our game of Quicks, and I see this guy who was sitting at another table. He was sort of kind of watching us, and he had a copy of I can't remember. It's like the Battle of Wizards, Death at Mount Skull's Fire, or something like that. This is a game you've heard of, I'm sure. And he comes over and he says, "Are you playing a game?" And they say, "Oh yeah, we're just starting this game here." And he goes, "May I join you?" Because he had some games too, and so what we kind of meant to say was, "We'll finish this game and then you can join us," but there was some miscommunication. And so he just sat down. We're like, all right, well, sure. So we showed him how to play Quicks, and we all played together, and he was very nice. He's a young man, maybe 19 or 20, from a town near Reykjavik, and he had come into town for game night at the cafe, because it turned out this cafe is a game gathering place, where, kind of like my Toggle Game Club, where all these people show up on Monday night to play games. So while we're playing this game of Quicks with this guy, somebody comes in from the game and sets a game down on the table and says hello to our friend, whose name was Gefir, something like that. I wrote it down in my BG snaps. Apologies, friend, if you're listening. And then while we're playing Quicks, they open up a cupboard and they get out all these games, and all these people start coming in. So by the time we're done playing Quicks, there's now a huge crowd of people playing games all around us. And then our friend offered, or asked if we'd be interested in playing another game, and offered to teach us Yggdrasil, which is a great game to play if you're in Iceland, because it's a sort of pandemic style co-op where you're playing the gods of the Norse pantheon, trying to fight the demons or the villains of the Norse pantheon as they try to come in and institute Ragnarok. It was a really interesting game, and he did a pretty good job teaching it. We lost, but I think we had a lot of fun, and it was just a very delightful experience to get to play games at a game club accidentally in Iceland my last night there. So that was a highlight of the trip, and I got to mark down Yggdrasil as a game I've played now. So that was really fun. So that was Cafe Stefan. They have Monday night gaming if you find yourself in Reykjavik with time to spare. So that's my trip to Iceland and the games we played there. So I guess I'm curious, what do you do, or what? Pop over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let us know a trip you've taken. Maybe some games you've played with new people. Have you ever played a new game in a place that was like super relevant? So Yggdrasil in Iceland, for example. Pop over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let us know your experiences with those. Otherwise, thanks for joining me on this longer episode today. I look forward to next time we chat. Until then, I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.